Welcome to Mission Majjhima. Ajahn. Ajahn, so tell us about Majjhima Nikaya 79, the Culasakuludayi Sutta.
In this sutta, we meet Sakuludayi again, or just Udayan, who we met 2 suttas ago in Majjhima 77, and he hasn't yet learned his lesson. So in the beginning, the Buddha comes upon him, and he and his wanderer friends are engaging in animal talk. Again, this talk which is perpendicular to the path. And Udayan gets all of his followers to be quiet because the Buddha's coming, and he knows that the Buddha and his followers appreciate silence. So when the Buddha approaches, the Buddha actually asks Sakuludayi or Udayan what he would like to hear about, which is very interesting that the Buddha would, rather than just proposing a subject, would actually ask what his proposed interlocutor would like to speak about. And so Udayan brings up the subject of omniscience and mentions Niganthanataputta, the supposed founder of the Jain sect, and that according to this sutta and others, Niganthanataputta purports omniscience, that he can know all things uninterruptedly at all times. And the Buddha kind of shifts the focus to look at, rather than omniscience, that focusing on remembrance of past lives and the capacity to see the passing away and reappearance of other beings. And then shifts it even further back to Dhamma, so rather than speculation, because if you have one person who purports omniscience and someone else who's remembering back through past lives, one might say, I know the ultimate beginning, and then they might go back and forth about that, or they might purports to know the ultimate end and go back and forth about that. Whereas rather the Buddha teaches this principle of conditionality, which is specifically, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So that's the Buddha's primary. He's not claiming to know the beginning and end of everything, but to know the pattern from which that operates. So based on that, the subject goes to Sakuludayi, who purports his view, which is that there is this perfect light. And the Buddha asks to know more about that. And Udayan says, yeah, it's the perfect light which has no peer, which is perfect beyond perfect. And the Buddha says this is just equivocation. It's like asking someone who says they're in love with the most beautiful girl in the land, but then you ask, where the girl is from, or how tall she is, or what she looks like. One is unable to answer. So similarly, this kind of talk about the highest light, which is higher than the rest of the other higher lights, is just an endless string of sophistry, basically. So Udayan says, yes, but this perfect light is like a beryl gem, bright like a beryl gem. And the Buddha says, which is brighter, a beryl gem or a glowworm? And Udayan says, actually, glowworm is brighter. And the Buddha kind of goes up with things which are brighter and brighter, an oil lamp or a bonfire or the moon or the North Star or the moon or the sun at midday. And the Buddha says that he knows of many gods who are even brighter than the sun at midday. So too, Udayan is praising this thing which isn't even as bright as a glowworm. So then Udayan asks about an entirely pleasant world. And the Buddha then describes how he understands this concept of an entirely pleasant world, which is someone entering jhanas, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, and then entering the fourth jhana, one is able to have conversations with gods, and that conversation is the perfect, all happiness, all pleasure realm. That's the true meaning of what Udayan is asking about. And then the Buddha says, that is the path to actually attaining that all pleasant, all pleasure realm. And then he says there's actually something that's even better than that, which is the entire gradual training. So this is a really extended elaboration of the gradual training from when the Buddha attains enlightenment, and then someone gains faith in the Buddha, goes forth, gives up unethical action, and then starts training in contentment, in sense restraint, in all these higher form, giving up the hindrances, training in the jhanas, seeing past rebirths, training in seeing the principle of rebirth in other beings, and then attainment of ultimate liberation. And then finally, Udayan is very inspired and asks to go forth. And the Buddha is willing to do that, but actually Udayan's followers talk him out of wanting to ordain. So it's a kind of a sad ending to this whole story. And Anjan, what would you like to draw out of this sutta?
Great summary. And, just to zero in on one of the first things you mentioned, which is how the Buddha asks Udayan what he would like to talk about. For me, Udayan's a teacher in his own right, and it's kind of quite a beautiful way of the Buddha letting him save face, not saying, I'm going to instruct you on something, but what would you like to talk about, Udayan? So kind of just one of those little gems you can sort of suss out of the interactions that the Buddha has and how he navigates with grace. And then I loved how you pointed out the kind of sophistry of the ultimate Udayan's talking about. It's the best. And what's the best? It's the best that there's nothing better than. It's super, super good. And yes, it's sophistry, but it also actually points to something quite profound, which is one thing people might begin to see in the Buddhist teachings is he used apophatic method. He defined the ultimate nibbana mainly in terms of what it is not, what you let go of to get there. Via negativa, it's called in the Christian tradition. So you are not this body, you're not this personality. And you see, the problem of defining the ultimate liberation of heart in positive terminology is at some point you just start stacking on superlatives without anything happening. But if you define it by what you're letting go of, stress, suffering, identification, movement, anicca, that is a more reliable movement towards the ultimate. So actually there's something quite profound in the Buddha singling that out as a point of critique. And the next, as you noted, where he says, what's more bright, a beryl gem or a glowworm? And then so on through stars and the sun. Something quite profound there too, because Udayan's relying on a very poetically beautiful image of a beryl gem. But the Buddha, there's a sutta called the Drum Pig Sutta, where the Buddha says at some point in the future, the Dharma will be lost because people will think the words of poets beautiful to hear, worth listening to, and forget to listen to discourses deep in dealing with emptiness. And he's pointing here, I think, to the kind of slipperiness of poetic language. Like beryl gem sounds great, but okay, the Buddha's sort of twisting it. Okay, what about a glowworm? That's brighter, right? And you just see how inaccurate these terms are. So it's quite brilliant and important to sort of not buying into poetic language and seeing the beauty of the Buddha's articulation largely in terms of what one lets go of to reach the ultimate and the precision of that approach. And the next thing is you see that when the Buddha talks about the training he can teach, or part of it, he gets to the third jhana, which is a realm of, or a state of sukha, pleasure, brightness. And the wanderers of Udayan and the commentaries also affirm this, say this is what we aim for. And the commentaries say that they took the third jhana, this state of deep, luminous concentration, as the ultimate. But the Buddha is saying actually even farther. The fourth jhana is even above that. And then, of course, his whole training in insight and the gradual training. But there's something very significant about the fact that the third, so often spiritual paths can get stuck on these bright, luminous states. And the fourth jhana is a state much more of equanimity, equipoise, purity of mindfulness, and just how difficult it is or subtle that movement is from a radiance to kind of a subtlety. And that I think the Buddha's pointing to that. There's this other step actually. And it just strikes me how often our eyes get fixed on the radiance and forget kind of there's a more subtle level below that. So I love how the Buddha points to that. And then, as you noted, the Buddha at the beginning putting aside all these thoughts of omniscience and saying, let the future be, let the past be. This is what I teach at the heart of it, the arising and falling of, idapachayata, dependent origination. When this arises, that arises. And finally, just how the followers who die and keep them from ordaining, as you noted, by saying it's as if what had been a water jug will become the pitcher. And just to note, may we all remain pitchers and have plenty of room for water to be poured into us. I thought that's quite a beautiful thing, kind of recollection. So a lot hidden in the sutta, even though it can initially seem quite esoteric. So Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is sabanyuta, which means omniscience, literally sabba, all, anya, knowing, so ta, the state of, so the state of knowing everything. That's what Niganta Nataputta is purported to have claimed, and which the Buddha qualifies.